Dom and Vaughn. Let's get right into it.
All right, so we just watched Blue Beetle. It is Friday the 18th. We just got out of the movie theater. So you saw the title. Obviously, that's the discussion of today's video. To start off, I just want to get into a spoiler-free review of the movie. So I don't have a whole lot good to say about it, but essentially, I think the movie, it's obviously a family film, and I think it does that pretty well. I think that general viewers are able to enjoy this movie. We didn't really, and we'll get into why later. But I think that most of it's pretty. I found it pretty contrived and
Pretty predictable.
very predictable. But there were quite a few people in our theater who were enjoying it, laughing.
Oh, yeah, we could tell.
And, it's just not really our cup of tea. But I think if you enjoy MCU content, Star Wars 2 probably, they're both kind of in the same ballpark in terms of writing. I think if you enjoy stuff like that, you'll enjoy this. I think this is actually a cut above typical MCU content.
Oh, yeah, I would agree.
At least since Phase 4 started.
Yeah.
Maybe not before that, but since Phase 4 started, yeah. It's I think this movie's better than those.
Easily. Not even a competition.
So, yeah. So decide who you are. If you're a general viewer or if you like to examine things a little bit more, you might not enjoy it too much. So now we're going to get into a plot summary. Now, it's worth mentioning that when the trailer dropped and Dom finally got me to see it, we thought it looked very, very similar to the movie Venom. And in the first act, it definitely was. To start off, Venom begins with the Life Foundation ship having crashed on Earth and one of the symbiotes escaping, but the Life Foundation being able to recapture 3 of them. This movie begins with us in the icy mountains as the main villains of this movie, Victoria Cord, played by Susan Sarandon, and Lieutenant Carapax. Was he Lieutenant?
I believe so.
Yeah. Military guy, basically his character archetype. And they are unearthing what appears to be a massive orb, or they say that they have unearthed a massive orb, and now they're cutting into it to get the scarab within. And then after that, we flash forward into sometime later, like 6 months, a year. I don't know exactly what it was.
Not made very clear.
And at this point, we meet our main character, Jaime Reyes. He just got off his flight. He is about to reunite with his family, who have some troubling news that they're trying to figure out how to tell him. And it's a nice, happy reunion. And then they get some tacos, and
Then the sister lays everything out, just plain, simple, and blunt.
And basically their rent has tripled, and they can't afford their house anymore, and they're going to lose it.
Also, the dad went into cardiac arrest. That's just mentioned very nonchalantly.
Yeah, I actually didn't even catch that. I had no idea that happened. But from there, so Jaime just graduated. He has his degree. We don't know what the degree is yet, but they made sure to mention it about 5 times before. And he's basically saying that they're going to be rolling in money with his new degree, and he's going to help save the family, and they're going to get through this just fine. Then we literally just cut to him working a job with his sister, which conveniently is basically housekeeping for the pool area of Victoria Court. Now, coincidentally, his sister needs to take a shit, and she decides she wants to be extra about it, so they go inside the residence to go shit in the nice bathroom, I guess. And she
As opposed to the bathroom that the staff is supposed to use.
And she asks Jaime to stand guard for her. And this allows Jaime to bear witness to Victoria Cord having an argument with her niece, Jenny Cord, because Jenny is upset that they are reopening old projects and continuing to make weapons, which was not the course of the company after Jenny's father, Ted, supposedly died. So they get into an argument, and basically Jenny is being threatened, and she tells Carapax, the army dude, to back away from her, and Jaime jumps in and tells them to back off. And at this moment, like, Susan Sarandon is like, oh, well, who are you? And then the toilet flushes, and she comes out without washing her hands, all ecstatic about what she just did. And then the boss is right there, so they get fired.
Yep, on the spot. And then they go wait outside for an Uber because none of them have a car. And then Jenny walks outside.
And she basically apologizes to him for what happened and offers him a job for somewhere else in the company and says to come by the main building the next day.
And saying it pretty frantically, too, I'll add.
Yep. So the next day, basically, Jaime goes in there. There is nothing scheduled, so now he's just waiting in the lobby, hoping that she'll come down to get him or something like that, which is interesting because, for one, they exchange contact information. 2, Jaime hit her up later that first night to accept the offer again, I suppose, and didn't message her once he arrived. So that didn't make a whole lot of sense. No. But now he's waiting for her, and conveniently at this exact same time, Jenny has forgotten that she offered him a job, and she decides that now is the perfect time for her to go into a secret back room in the company and find the scarab, which she didn't know was actually there until she was there. She had a suspicion that Susan Sarandon had gotten her hands on it, and now she knows that for sure, and she decides to steal it by putting it in a little burger box from a fast food joint. And worth noting, in order to get into this room, she actually had to swipe a security badge from one of the building employees. So later on, after she steals the scarab, this guy comes back into the room and then realizes that there's new stuff in here that she left behind and that the scarab is gone. However, he should not be able to get back into the room because she took his security badge.
Yep.
So that's a bit of an issue. Basically, this means that the building would have been put under a security lockdown sooner because he would have tried to access the room, not be able to, and realize his badge has been stolen, and there needs to be a lockdown issued. But regardless, he finds out, calls for a lockdown of the building, and Jenny is trying to get out of the building. Jaime sees her coming down the elevator and goes chasing after her. And because he gets in her way, well, not even, she wouldn't have been able to get out of the building on time anyway. But the lockdown happens, and so she gives the scarab to him, tells him to guard it with his life, and he leaves somehow after the building has been locked down, and the security guards don't stop him. And she just starts ordering them around somewhere else. Now, I know what you're thinking. They're just listening to her, so that's why they didn't stop him. No, he walked right past them before she said anything to them. So they should have stopped him, but they did not.
Yep.
Now, Jaime takes the scarab back home, and this is where we learn that Jaime is horrible at communicating because he's trying to tell them that he's not supposed to open it, and they start chanting for him to open it, all right? And he ends up opening it, and then they start taking it. They start playing with it, and he's trying to get them to stop. But he does not at all mention that the building was locked down as he was being given this, that this could be like some kind of security risk, what they're playing with here. He doesn't communicate anything of importance. He just says, oh, she told me not to open it, so we probably shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, more like she told me not to open this right before a bunch of armed security came to lock down the building.
Yeah. But as a result of this, basically everybody gets like a turn playing with the scarab, I guess. And then now it finally ends up in Jaime's hands, which activates it because the scarab chooses him. And the scarab starts to, take him as a host. And the family, this is where they start to be really annoying. They just scream for about a minute straight. while we have a super slow suit activation that, in my opinion, ran way too long, and the family is just screaming the entire time, being absolutely useless, except for George Lopez. George Lopez is the only one who at least tried to pull the scarab off his face and got launched across the room for it. Yep. And so what we're going to get into, George Lopez manages to be, the name of his character is Rudy, and that character is the most annoying character at times, and he's also the most useful member of the family. And that still manages to be a massive problem. So basically, now that the scarab is fully activated and Jaime is fully suited up, the scarab decides to start a diagnostics test.
Which means that it needs to start by launching Jaime into orbit. First thing, that's what must happen.
Yep, he just immediately gets launched up into orbit, which really just makes it feel like Iron Man, because that's the first thing he did when he completed a suit capable of flight.
Yep.
People were making comparisons to that when the trailer dropped as well. And yeah, so he flies around, does all this diagnostic stuff. That's when he comes down, and the trailer shot of him cutting the bus is because he landed on someone's car. They make a joke about psychedelic drugs, and then a bus almost hits him, and it gets cut in half, which totally should have killed someone, because there was a guy who was standing next to the seats, holding one of the one of the poles, and he was his leg was over the cut when the bus had completely been cut through. So he probably should have lost a foot.
Yeah, absolutely. The other issue that I have with that scene is that the bus is perfectly split down the middle now, and each half just stands perfectly upright as people keep shifting.
Mm-hmm. However,
it doesn't topple over to either side.
Something I did like in this scene, immediately Jaime is apologizing. He's frantic. He's freaking out. He's trying to Jaime's freaking out more than the passengers are, to be honest, which might be a bit weird. But I like that, we clearly get an understanding that he cares a lot about human life, and he did not at all want anything like this to happen. And then the suit continues kidnapping him. And then eventually he comes home and then passes out. The suit takes him back home. He de-armors naked. It destroys all his clothes, and he passes out. What happened from here, Dom?
I remember next they woke him up by holding up a thing of Vaseline or something.
It was like Vapor Rub.
Oh, yeah.
So they wake him up, and it's not too long after this point where he goes trying to find Jenny Cord, and he pulls up to the company building conveniently right as she is leaving and being chased. But we don't see who's chasing her yet, but she's trying to leave and get into a vehicle. She gets into his car, and then armed guards start shooting at them. And it's worth noting, he took George Lopez's truck, his Tacoma. So now the truck is being riddled with bullet holes, which I did actually like this. I thought this was pretty funny, especially when he was freaking out about his truck after they got back to the house.
Yep.
So basically, Jenny tries to help them figure out how to remove the scarab from his back. And in order to do this, they need to get something that's inside the company building. So they need to go back to the place where she just escaped. I don't know why this wasn't what she was already taking, but they go back to the building, and this building has terrible security because all they have to do is take out the cameras, which was super contrived in and of itself, because George Lopez just happens to be a tech whiz and can create some kind of EMP device. And he was already building it before the movie started, and it's so close to being done, he only needs 2 more hours to finish it.
But this family's broke.
Yeah, they're broke. So they take out the cameras, and they just walk in. There are no armed guards patrolling the perimeter.
Yeah, and they don't even just take out the cameras. The character Rudy jams their signal and has like a cartoon playing over all of their security screens.
Yeah, he was able to completely co-opt their system.
Yeah, and one of their security guards was just loving it.
But they just kind of stroll in, and this is when we have the first big encounter with Carapax, because he has basically what Susan Sarandon is trying to do with the Scarab is she's trying to, very basic movie villain plot. She's trying to use the Scarab to create an army of her own Scarab so she can create super soldiers. She calls it the OMAC. So Carapax has basically the prototype for the OMAC. And this is where we have the first big showdown between Carapax and Blue Beetle. Obviously, I liked that at first Blue Beetle was getting his ass kicked. All right, that I thought was done well. And then, of course, the Scarab offers to take control. Jaime allows it to, and now he whoops Carapax's ass to the point where the Scarab itself is about to kill him, and Jaime doesn't want this because he doesn't want to be a killer, and the Scarab agrees to stop, basically. And then the fight continued after that because reasons. I forget exactly why the fight had to continue from there, but it did. And the way that Carapax got defeated the first time around was actually by way of George Lopez and his Katoma. He managed to flip his Tacoma around so that the EMP device, which they had in the bed of the truck, but with a broken tailgate, would be launched out at Carapax with so much force that it would send him careening into the back of a semi-truck.
Yeah, the way they did it visually is that this was more force that was put on this guy than what Blue Beetle was capable of doing.
Yep, and for that reason, he was now hurt enough that he can't really pursue. So they get away, and Carapax has lost them. Man.
Yeah, we've already established this guy can fly, and he just doesn't try to fly into the air to see if he can see them. He just lets them get away.
Pretty much. Advocate voice. So from there, basically, what is that? They take Jenny. Yeah, they take Jenny back, right? No. Now, that's right. Now they have what they were after in the building. Now they have this thing called the key, which allows them to access another secret room that Jenny's father, Ted Kord, had set up. And this is where we find out that Ted Kord himself used to be a superhero that was operating back when Jaime was just a child. And this is where we learn a bunch of backstory information. But most importantly, this is the room where we'll basically give the characters all the tools that they don't deserve so that they can make the plot happen.
Yep.
So, but the reason why they're here right now is to see if they can find anything in Ted Kord's computer that will allow them to remove the Scarab. And this is where, while George Lopez does that, we get some nice, moments between Jenny and Jaime, because obviously they're going to end up together, which was hinted pretty much from their first scene together.
Yep.
Like we said, it was a bit predictable. So they have their moment. George Lopez interrupts it right before they kiss, and he basically tells them that the only way that the Scarab will come off of Jaime is if he dies. Yep. So from here, how do we end up against Carapax again? Oh yeah, that's right. In order for them, when they basically found this place, after they escaped from Carapax, the truck, which was now riddled with bullets and leaking multiple different fluids, managed to drive all night to morning, where they arrived at their new location, which was her father's old house, which is what included this secret room that the key accessed. And while they are there, Susan Sarandon's helicopter flies over them because she is going to Jaime's family. I'm not exactly... They didn't even really say how they found them, did they? But I actually do know...
Track the
well, I actually do know how they did.
Or whatever.
when the Tacoma truck was fleeing the scene, its license plate fell off after when they arrived. Man, if they let the license plate fall out when they were still at Carapax's place, they could have just found it that way. But they didn't. Man.
Nope, they didn't think about that part.
So yeah, they basically the main villains know who Jaime is now, but we don't really know why or how. And now they're showing up at the house, so Jaime goes to save them. And this is where we get into the best section of the entire movie. This is actually the point where I would have a really hard time not enjoying it, because I really thought this was executed well, where the family is basically in front of their home, in front of all these armed guards, all these soldiers. Blue Beetle shows up, starts fighting them, basically helps save his family. And this is where the movie really surprised me, because the dad died. He had a heart attack, which was payoff from him having one earlier. They mentioned him having one earlier in the film, and now with this moment of higher stress, he collapsed with the sister right there. And this happens right as Blue Beetle is basically in a standoff with the helicopter as they're about to fire a weapon that could actually stop him. And right before Blue Beetle is about to fire his shot, his sister starts screaming out at him because their dad just collapsed, which causes him to lose focus. And there is one issue with this scene, actually, because they fire this claw from the helicopter, which the Scarab definitely should have, because it's it's programmed to protect him, so it should have just thrusted him out of the way.
It should have had some kind of counter or contingency, something that it should have been able to do to prevent it from being captured in that instance.
Yeah, but I didn't really mind it too much in the moment. But regardless, the Scarab stops doing its job so that the plot can happen. But Blue Beetle gets caught by the claw, and it is done pretty well, because now he's completely subdued, and he has to watch as his family is basically helpless to stop. They're dealing with the fact that he's being taken and that his father just died all at once. Although I'm not really sure why the soldiers just let the family go after that, because they kind of just left.
The scene was so emotional, so powerful, Devin, that they were just overblown by sympathy and empathy, that they just had to leave the family alone.
Yep.
That's what happened.
Man, we're going to have to blow through this. We're getting into a bit too many details that we can just kind of leave in a nitpick section later. So to kind of breeze through what the rest of the movie looks like, the family decides that they need to help Jaime, and Jenny shows up to help them.
Even though she was already there.
Yeah. She was already, because this whole scene happened at night, and now it's daytime again, so it's the next day where they're talking about helping Jaime. So Jenny left, or no, she was all the way away, because she was back at the house with George Lopez. She was back at Ted Kord's house.
Still, it took an awful long time for her to get there.
Well, I don't know, man. It did take them from night to day to get there in the first place, so it is at least somewhat accurate. It's following its internal consistency.
Yeah.
But now she's there, and she's going to help them, so she basically takes them back to Ted Kord's house so that they can get the weaponry to help Jaime, which includes Ted Kord's big ship. And with that, they're able to blast off at this island compound where they're holding Jaime, where they are basically trying to extract the Scarab code so that they can put it into all of their OMAC systems and have a fully operational army.
Yep, and that had to have been a lot of time that they wasted having to go all the way back to that house.
It had to be a lot of time, because now to follow the internal consistency, it now must be... Well, it was nighttime again, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's what was throwing me off, I guess.
They
I couldn't remember right, because they had it so jarred.
Yeah. That is a lot of issues, because it didn't seem like it's that far from when Blue Beetle flew over there.
No, not at all. It seems like it would be at most a 30-minute drive.
Yeah,
Maybe
I would say
40.
so. Because overnight is the entire state away. But now Blue Beetle goes, or he's captured, and his family is going to save him. And it's kind of a combination of both because the Scarab code is being extracted into the OMAC systems. Jaime's father shows up inside of his mind to give him the strength to succeed. Kind of like Han Solo showing up to talk to Kylo Ren in Rise of Skywalker. Kind of like that. And because of this, Jaime is able to not die in the process of the code transfer, which they said should have happened, basically. And he was able to overcome that through the strength of will.
And now, on top of that, the wavelengths between Jaime and the Scarab are now synchronizing.
So they are truly one now. So now at this point is basically when Jaime starts running loose through the compound, trying to get out. He starts running into members of his family while Carapax is still chasing them. There's a few moments here. It is, of course, also worth noting that the family got a nice big batch of weapons, as we saw in the trailer, from Ted Kord's house that they used to help Jaime, which I have a big problem with, but we'll get to that later. Basically, what ends up happening is because the Scarab saw into Carapax's mind during the code transfer, it now knows his entire story. And we have this big moment where, because of the actions this villain has taken in the film, Jaime is about to kill him now that he's finally defeated him in this fight, which I thought the fight was pretty good. I think the fights in this movie actually aren't that bad. It's like when it's Carapax versus Blue Beetle, it's not that bad. When it's Blue Beetle versus soldiers, I find it to be a bit mind-numbing. And there's a few issues in there we'll get into as well. So Blue Beetle is about to kill Carapax because of what he's done, but instead of that, the Scarab itself stops him this time, and it shows him his memories and what he's been through, which at the same time, like because of the code transfer, has kind of brought his memories back to the surface of his mind because he has a lot of trauma from when he was a kid. And I thought he was done well. I wish we actually saw more of that character. I wish we could have fleshed him out a bit more because I actually really like I really like the vision they were going with for that character, and I think it was pretty good. And I just wish that they had gone a bit deeper with it.
Yep.
Because I think, just kind of a memory dump like that at the very end of the movie isn't really as compelling for me.
Not at all.
But because of this, Blue Beetle chooses not to kill him. He listens to the Scarab. At this same sort of time, Susan Sarandon is kind of fighting with her niece, Jenny, and Susan orders Carapax to kill them or whatever, and he refuses to. And then he basically takes Susan with him, commits suicide by blowing up his suit, which causes basically the entire island to be blown up. And they manage to, they escape in the ship. And then at the end of the movie, they have a funeral for it seems as though the characters returned to their house that was still burned from the funeral for their father. And then a bunch of members of their town show up to offer them their support. And this is also the point in time where Jenny shows up to basically make everything A-okay. She's going to help pay for their house, replace it, and basically everything's going to be A-okay because Jenny got the fam now, right?
Yep.
And then we get a very Superman-type ending where Jenny and Jaime finally have their moment and they kiss. And then Jaime flies up with her in his arms. And that's pretty much the movie. So that is basically the summary of the plot. And now we'll get into the reasons why we severely dislike that. For starters, the family plays a big role in this movie. And I definitely think that the team for this movie, I think they encapsulate the feel of a family movie well. But for us, the problem really comes into play in the fact that the movie is very tonally inconsistent. It seems like it's trying to be too serious and too funny at the same time, and the family is the biggest proponent of the comedic part of it. And it's done in a way that I'm sure some people would enjoy, but I don't really find the kind of comedy that this movie chooses to be funny.
Yeah, it just seems like a lot of the jokes are just kind of inserted in just for the heck of it.
And I will also mention, this is a bit of a side note. I feel like I just have to bring this up. The director of this movie did say that this movie is unapologetically Latino, and I would definitely say that's the case. In terms of cultural aspects, I don't mind it at all. I think it actually helps the movie a lot the way that they bring in the Latin American culture, because they just have so many characters that fall into that category, and I think they do a good job at that. However, there are a few racial moments where characters are saying, like, oh, the government just always locks up Mexicans and things like that. And I don't mind anything cultural, but once you get into like racial stuff like that and it feels more political, it really pulls me out of the experience.
Yeah, same here.
And then I also want to touch on, I've heard that this is supposed to be the first entry in the new DCU. I've also heard it's meant to exist outside of that. So we kind of want to go into both a little bit. So the DCU that they're building is, we already know, is going to be a bit into the timeline. They're not going to start with origin or anything like that. It's because Superman has been established for a while based on what we've heard of the movie that James Gunn is working on for that, as well as the Batman movie that they're working on. So there are, of course, mentions of Batman and Superman in this movie. So I think that if this movie was the first entry in the DCU, that would flow pretty well, because we already know that this is supposed to be a pre-established world. However, there are a few other problems with that. Like, I mainly have a problem with one particular line I want to mention, which is that when they're in Ted Kord's base, there's a blue utility belt, and Jaime Reyes makes a remark about it being similar to Batman's tech. And normal people should not know what Batman's tech looks like. He's like that should not be the way it is. We're talking about a guy who, if he disappears in like 20 years' time, Gotham thinks he's an urban legend. This isn't someone who we have clear daylight photographs of that we can make out clear images of his tech. Normal people do not know what Batman's tech looks like.
Nope.
So the main problem also is that the movie is just built on so many contrivances. I think it's contrived that Jaime's younger sister just happens to have a job working like pool maintenance for like the richest person in proximity to them. Like in
Who
their
the family also talks crap about left and right in like the first half of the movie.
Yeah. So pretty weird.
But yeah, the daughter works for her.
So that was contrived. Also, the biggest contrivance was that Jaime just happened to show up right as she was leaving and needed his help. But however, to kind of take things back to the Venom comparisons, which really, the comparisons between Venom and Blue Beetle really end once we hit the end of the first act. Once Jaime has the Scarab, it's no longer really comparable to Venom. The plot just differs too much. But up to that point, it is pretty similar. And I do have to mention, because I want to give credit where credit is due, and I don't think this movie is absolutely terrible. It's not my cup of tea, but I don't think it's bad, necessarily. I think the plot needs work, but I think it's executed extremely well. And I think that the way that Jaime gets his Scarab works a lot better in this movie than the way Eddie Brock gets the symbiote in Venom. And the reason for that is because despite the fact that certain things were contrived in this movie, Venom is even more contrived. The main reason why Eddie Brock is able to get the symbiote in Venom is because one of the main villain's partners chooses that she doesn't want to be a part of this anymore, and she goes to find Eddie for some reason. For some reason, she chooses Eddie. That alone is contrived. And she just happens to know what store he frequents so that she can run into him there. That is extremely contrived. But in this movie, it's not nearly as bad. We went through it in the plot summary. I actually don't think it's that bad. I actually don't mind too much at all the way that he gets the Scarab. Him coming back and helping her is extremely contrived. But like, you really just have to get past the fact that the sister worked for the Kords that's the biggest contrivance. After that, it manages to flow with a reasonable amount of logic.
Yeah. I have one pretty, not like that big of an issue, but it really ticks me off anytime I hear it. The Siri voice.
Yes, that is. I think it's worth mentioning now the way that we were first introduced to the character of Blue Beetle.
Yeah. The two of us were first introduced to the character of Jaime Reyes Blue Beetle from a show that for a long time was very dear to our hearts, Young Justice. That show introduced Blue Beetle in the second season. Blue Beetle was a very pivotal character in that story, as the creators of the Scarab, the Reach, were essentially the big threat of the season against Earth and the Justice League.
Mm-hmm.
And in that show, the way that they did Blue Beetle was, I would say, pretty perfect. Like, the Scarab did have its own voice, you could say, but it's really just a toned down or monotone version of Jaime's voice.
Yeah, they kind of like audio mixed the voice actor for Jaime Reyes' voice and turned that into the voice for the Scarab, which isn't too dissimilar to the fact that Tom Hardy, who played Eddie Brock in Venom, also recorded the lines for Venom, and they just mixed it to sound like Venom. I think that version worked very, very well for Jaime Reyes in Young Justice, and I do not think that the Siri voice, basically just an AI robot voice for the voice of the Scarab, I don't think that works anywhere near as well.
Not at all, because the Siri AI voice makes it seem like the Scarab was made on Earth, even though they make it clear multiple times in the movie that the Scarab is from extraterrestrial origins. And they make it clear, at least at one point in the movie, and then never bring it up again, that the Scarab was designed to be a sort of world-ending weapon. Whatever you imagine, I can create. What? This is supposed to be a world-ending threat? I know that in Young Justice, they had a clear reason for why the Scarab was more passive, you could say. But the Scarab, or at least the voice from the Scarab that Jaime could hear in his head, would still make suggestions to Jaime for how he should handle this or that with very aggressive or brutal ways. And then in this movie, it's like kind of the same, but it's honestly very comparable to what was the name of that Tony Stark AI from Spider-Man: Homecoming?
He named it, I forget the name he chose, but it
Like Karen or something?
that's what it was.
Yeah, they chose Karen for that movie.
Yeah, it is very similar to that.
It reminds me of the instant kill thing. It's like, oh, it recommends you use deadly force for the sake of protection, and then, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to kill him. Doesn't try it again.
Yeah, but I don't think that I just wish. So for one thing, we do know that they chose to take some influence visually from Injustice 2 Blue Beetle for the weapon choices for Blue Beetle in this movie. I just wish that they took a bit more influence from Young Justice in terms of how Jaime and the Scarab interact, because the interactions in that show between them are a lot better, and it feels a lot more organic and natural. It doesn't feel as forced as it does in this movie, and there isn't really. They say that the Scarab is sentient, but it doesn't feel sentient. The movie tells you that the Scarab is sentient, but it doesn't really show you that it's sentient outside of just what the plot needs to have happen.
Yeah, the Scarab just feels like an alien computer, nothing more. They have a sort of arc in the movie for the Scarab where what even is the starting point? It's just that the Scarab just wants to defend Jaime because Jaime is his host. No other reason or motivation beyond that for the Scarab. And then at the end of the movie, it's just like, oh, I want to help save your family.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
And save your girlfriend to be.
I also did find that interesting because they specifically said that the Scarab is only really designed to protect the host, and it was warning Jaime about danger to his family. And not that that's a bad thing. I just wish that there was a bit more of a clear show of progression there, you know?
Yeah.
Another thing that is worth mentioning here is that in one of their end credit scenes, it is revealed that, of course, Ted Kord is alive. A possible angle I could see here is that they do want to run the Reach angle, and that Ted Kord is somehow wrapped up in something to do with that. But I haven't heard anything about plans for a sequel. I know the lead actor wants to reprise his role. So there's potential that maybe they could do things right if they decided to go down that road. But I have a hard time believing that they would be able to execute that story as well.
Yeah, I have a very hard time picturing it. But all of that is truly just dependent on if this movie makes enough money to warrant the studio to make a sequel.
True. And I do honestly want this movie to succeed. I have my own issues with it, but I think it's more enjoyable, and I think it's better than the majority of superhero movies that have been coming out lately.
Yeah, and I will still take this version of Jaime Reyes Blue Beetle any day over the Smallville Jaime Reyes Blue Beetle.
That is a definite fact. Like I don't have too many problems with the way that he acts. I think that the actor does a good job. I think it's a solid version of Jaime Reyes. I just wish he existed in a better story. And I think that's one of the things that worked a lot better about Young Justice Jaime Reyes is that he got to interact within a larger world and these other characters. And the backing behind Blue Beetle in our version, in our minds, the best version of that is the Reach, and that works. The Reach works best as a villain to the entire group of heroes on Earth, the Justice League, the Teen Titans. It works better to be wrapped up in all of that and not just Blue Beetle. So in terms of a Blue Beetle standalone movie, I think that they made a good choice in choosing Carapax as the villain. I really just wish that they chose a bit of a more unique and nuanced way of going about the plot, because it was very simplistic, predictable, generic. I feel like I've seen this same kind of story before. It doesn't really feel like this is an experience that only Blue Beetle can give me. The thing that makes the movie the most unique is definitely the way they go about Jaime's family. I think that Jaime's family in this movie is both a weakness of the movie and a strength. They manage to be both at the exact same time, because the family lends a lot to what the director is trying to encapsulate with the film. But I think that, like we've mentioned, it contributes a lot to the tonal inconsistencies and a lot of the type of humor that we don't really appreciate. I'm sure a lot of you guys don't either. And I really just wish that, and me personally, him too, when it comes to superhero content, I don't really care about the main character's family. There's a reason why it's so common for them to be orphans, dude. Like, we kind of just wanted to see them kick ass. We don't really care too much about their family. But yeah. I will say, like, you know, I'm surprised how much I was able to enjoy the side characters of the family. I thought I was going to hate all of them.
Me
and
too.
I was pleasantly surprised. And what definitely helped that is the fact that the writers were willing to actually let those characters suffer a bit. You know, the father did die, their house did burn, which actually didn't make sense. I don't know if you caught this in the theater, but the way that the house caught on fire is when the soldiers are bringing out the family because they were hiding inside.
Yeah, and then a candle tipped over onto the ground.
A candle was knocked
on
over.
its side, and then it ignited the carpet.
Yep. But there was a little visual detail here that I caught. What I saw, you know a candle and it has the little blade of fire. When you tip a candle, the blade stays perfectly upright. If you take a candle and you tilt it, the blade stays upright. But the candle was tipped over and the blade was pointed out so that it was like pretty much touching the carpet. It wasn't pointed upward. So the fire wouldn't have even started, guys. Like the fire should not have started.
How did I not notice that in the theater?
You have to be paying attention for stuff like this, man. But yeah, so the fire shouldn't have even started. So, but aside from that, The fact that they actually did, allow these things to happen, I wasn't expecting it. I for some reason thought that the family was just gonna be like untouchable, completely untouchable. And the other thing I was surprised about was in the emotional scene where the dad dies, the girl who plays the sister did a really good job in that scene. I was genuinely surprised. I was kind of underwhelmed by some of the performances within the first act of the movie. And I think in the second act, they were kind of bringing a bit more of an A game than in the first.
Yeah, I agree.
So I enjoyed that. Like I said, that sequence where the father ended up dying and Jaime's protecting his family was definitely one of the best in the movie for me.
Yeah, I still don't know how I feel about his father
Showing up.
Yeah, that to me felt pretty out of place. It was making me think like I was watching Black Panther again.
Yeah, it made me feel like I was watching Deadpool 2 with Deadpool keep continuously dying and talking to his girl.
Yep.
But
yeah, point with that just being we've seen stuff like that so many times.
Exactly.
It is not unique in this movie. That's one part of the movie where it's just kind of, all right, this is the next scene.
Another thing I liked about this part of the movie, well, maybe not this part. I lost it. You threw me off when you practically hit my hair.
My apologies.
But obviously, I think I think Young Justice gave us a pretty good understanding of the character. And in that, it's funny. It's funny because in that version, Jaime still has a family. He has a family that loves him and stuff. We never saw them once in the show.
Yep.
We never saw them once.
That's why when I found out that they were going to have the family be like a core part of this movie, I'm just like,
what?
What? I never even thought about his family.
But yeah. And there was so we have a thing about characters earning the place that they are. When it comes to like, someone like Steve Rogers getting the super soldier serum, in the first Captain America movie, we see that he clearly earned that, right?
Yep.
But so there's generally two types of ways to earn powers, based on what we've seen. There's the you earned it way, and then there's the second one where you didn't earn it, but you basically end up deserving it because you suffered with it. That's the case Blue Beetle is in. He has all this stuff thrust on him. He doesn't understand what's happening to him. He deals with all this hardship caused by the fact that these evil people want the Scarab back. And as a result of all the suffering he goes through, he, in our eyes, earns the Scarab. It's the same thing that Peter Parker goes through. He didn't earn the spider bite, but he earns it afterwards.
Yep.
So I bring that up because the members of the family got weapons to help save Blue Beetle later on in the film. Generally, I don't like that shit. And when the trailer dropped, that was one of the biggest thing that annoyed me. It's the same thing that annoyed me in the first Shazam movie, because Billy tries to figure out how to use the powers, but then at the end of the movie, he gives it to his family, and they all get it instantly.
Yep. None of the family members need training. They just got it. They're good to go. They are ready for the final fight.
Exactly. However, I will give some credit to this movie, because everything that they had, every weapon that they had the members of the family use, they set up how it worked out beforehand. And I feel like they went through because they didn't get the weapons until after the father died. When we watched the trailer, I wasn't expecting the father to die. So I feel like because of that, they kind of earned it to a good extent. Still not exactly where I would want it, but I think that they earned it. And then they really didn't give any indication afterwards that they kept any of it, So to me, it seems like they gave it back. And because of stuff like that, I don't have an issue with it.
But hey, they gave it back, and that Jenny has control over that stuff, right? She's part of the family. They have access.
Yeah, but that's still not as bad as some other stuff,
Oh, yeah, I'm not saying it's that bad or anything.
But at this point, do you have anything else to mention about this movie?
Just that the uncle should not be able to do a lot of the stuff he's able to do.
Yeah, the uncle's crazy. That is a stereotype that keeps popping up in superhero media that I really dislike, where every single team just has to have the guy at the back computer who knows how to do all this technical stuff. like he said, if George Lopez can do all this, bro, they should not be broke. They should not be broke.
Yep. That's one of the major initial driving forces of the movie, and it makes no sense.
Yep. Oh, and then I did forget to mention earlier what Jaime Reyes' degree is. He has a pre-law degree.
Yep. He's going to lift his family out of poverty with pre-law.
Yep.
Pre-law.
He definitely. So yeah, in conclusion, because I don't want to just ramble about this movie. In conclusion, I think it's for today's standards, it's an above average superhero movie. I don't really think it's the best movie. It's definitely not the best a Blue Beetle movie can be. And as just a movie, I think it's subpar.
I'd say it's just a movie. It's about a 5 out of 10, maybe.
Yeah, I'd give it about a 5.
As a Blue Beetle movie, me having been so fond of the character from Young Justice, at least for so many years, I would honestly rate it more like a 2.5 out of 10.
As a Blue Beetle movie, I might go as high as a 4. However, to give you guys a bit of a tease, because we're not done with this subject matter yet. We're going to do another video on Blue Beetle because when this man finally got me to watch that film, or the trailer
for the
film.
trailer.
When you finally got me to watch the trailer months ago, we had a very long discussion about what the movie appeared to be, our thoughts on it, and that ended up snowballing, as it normally does, into what would we do. And after about an hour, we had basically come up with a 3-movie plan for a Blue Beetle trilogy. We completely planned out, not I could tell you every single scene, not to that extent. I can tell you the general plot of what a trilogy of Blue Beetle movies should be. And that's going to be our next video, so stay tuned for that. But other than that, if you made it this far, I'd appreciate it if you liked and subscribed, comment if you disagree with anything that I said, or if you agree with it too. Let me know what I was right about. Other than that, we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.